Hey guys, what's going on? So, if you know me, you know that I listen to a ton of podcasts. So today I thought I would just give a rundown on the podcasts that I listen to and what I like about them. I'm just going to go in alphabetical order, and the first one is the Andy Daly Podcast Pilot Project. That's a mouthful. This is a really new podcast, and I've only listened to, I think, 2 episodes so far, but I rather like it. So pretty much what this podcast is it's a different podcast every time. So the basic idea of this podcast is he's taking podcast ideas that were submissions to the Earwolf Podcasting Network, and supposedly you're listening to the pilot episode of that podcast. But what it really is it's him and his friends come on and they improvise that podcast. It's really interesting. Definitely improv heavy if you're into that kind of podcast. A good, fun one to listen to. And I rather enjoy it so far, and I'm interested to see where it goes and the different ideas that pop up. The next one I have is a very famous one. It is Comedy Bang Bang with Scott Aukerman. Very fun. I think the first thing I listened to when I got back into this was actually the end of the year countdown. So pretty much the public votes on their favorite episodes from the previous year, and then they compile the best bits from each episode. And that was really fun for me to listen to because you get a whole slew of different characters and guests on the show. So yeah, I think that might be a good place to start if you're new to it and interested. Once again, it is very improv heavy. I really like that stuff. So yeah, it's really fun. The next one I listen to is Doug Loves Movies, and it is hosted by Doug Benson, the comedian, and pretty much he has guests on, and they play movie trivia games called the Leonard Maltin game, and there's a couple other ones they throw in there too. And I really like this one because it's both really funny because of him and all the guests that he has on, but it also super ties into movies, and it's really fun to play along with the game, which I am terrible at, by the way. But yeah, really fun. I super love it. Every new episode just makes me excited. I can't remember one that I just wouldn't listen to again. Next up is another comedy-based movie podcast, and that is How Did This Get Made? And they talk about really shitty movies and how crazy they are and how weird it is that these really shitty movies exist and made money. And it's really fun. My favorite episode by far is the episode where they watch and talk about Birdemic, which is my favorite bad movie. But yeah, they have one guest on each episode, and they'll just watch a bad movie and talk about it. Really fun, really fun. Next up is Jonah Radio, and that is hosted by Jonah Ray of the Nerdist Podcast. He talks about new bands and music and everything, and he has a bunch of cool guests that are normally musicians, or at least somehow rooted in music. I don't like all the music they play, but they have put some really good songs on there, so if you like music and you're interested in talking to comedians about music, then this one's a really good one to listen to. Next up is the Nerdist Podcast, which is where said Jonah Ray is originally from, pretty much. And it's just Chris Hardwick, Jonah Ray, Matt Myra, all comedians, and they just talk to famous people about projects or just having fun, and it's super nerdy most of the time, which I love, and it's always really funny and really interesting. They've got some crazy guests on the podcast. So if you're into geek culture and you want some really cool, interesting guests, this is a really good one to listen to. Next up, I have Pop My Culture. I don't think this is as huge as some of the other ones I listen to, but it's really fun. It's hosted by Cole Stratton and Vanessa Ragland, and they have a guest on each week, and it is just a podcast where they talk about current pop culture. This next one isn't really going to make sense unless you watch the show that it is based off of. This one is Talkin' TCGS, and it is a show that talks about past episodes of The Chris Gethard Show, TCGS. Let me shout for a second about how much I love The Chris Gethard Show. It is this crazy, weird, sometimes sad, but generally awesome show that is on public broadcast in Manhattan, but is also streamed online. The show is hosted by Chris Gethard, and I highly, highly, highly recommend giving it a chance. It's super funny. It's kind of changed my life. I love it. So anyway, Talkin' TCGS is based on that show where they talk about old episodes of the show. It's hosted by Griffin Newman, who is just, he works with the show, is a huge fan, all that kind of stuff, and Riley Selener, who is one of the actual characters on the show. And they just have people who are on the show come talk about past episodes. It's just really fun if you're into the show. Obviously, if you've never watched the Chris Gethard Show, you're just gonna kind of be confused, but you will probably at least be intrigued because the show is so crazy. The last one I listened to actually doesn't update anymore. It was an amazing podcast when it was running. It was called You Look Nice Today. I'm hoping you can still get it on iTunes. I don't see why you wouldn't. If not, you can find it on Google where you can download it. But it was a podcast with Merlin Mann, Scott Simpson, and Adam Lissagore. And pretty much what they would do is each episode they would try and pitch some new business model or something. And it was always just really silly and would kind of always just branch off in weird directions. And it was just really creative and really funny. And I just really loved it. So yeah, those are all the podcasts I listen to. I definitely recommend all of them. And I will see you guys later. So I spent yesterday just upcycling or reconstructing or whatever you want to call it to a couple old t-shirts. And as I take off all the pieces, you may or may not be able to tell, but that is a skin of Jack Patillo from Achievement Hunter.